I did want to play for y'all one of my favorite speeches, which was, of course, by Bernie Sanders. And the reason it was one of my favorite speeches is because it actually talked about COVID. And I know that like nobody talks about COVID. Biden doesn't even talk about COVID. Obviously,
Right.
Kamala Harris doesn't talk about COVID. Nobody wants to talk about it, even though it's still out there. People and largely although some of the things that kicked in the American Rescue Plan are still around, like thankfully paying for healthcare. There's like a little bit of a assistance from the federal government on that, which is it's fucking wild. But Bernie was like, and I don't want to play this whole thing, but I'm gonna play a little bit of it. Bernie was like, look at he basically said, we got all of this done because when push came to shove, people realized the government has a role to play. We can play this role, and we should continue to play this role. Take a look.
And now we need to summon that will again, because too many of our fellow Americans are struggling every day to just get by, to put food on the table, to pay the rent, and to get the health care they need. Brothers and sisters, bottom line, we need an economy that works for all of us, not just the billionaire class. My fellow Americans, when 60% of our people live paycheck to paycheck, the top 1% have never, ever had it so good. And these oligarchs tell us we shouldn't tax the rich. The oligarchs tell us we shouldn't take on price gouging. We shouldn't expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. And we shouldn't increase Social Security benefits for struggling seniors. Well, I've got some bad news for them. That is precisely what we are going to do. And we're going to win this struggle because this is precisely what the American people want from their government. And my friends, at the very top of that to-do list is the need to get big money out of our political process. Billionaires in both parties should not be able to buy elections, including primary elections.
Okay, so he transitioned a little bit at the end there, which I want to leave, but I really what I liked about this is that he is trying to. For me, I think that ever since 2020, we learned that basically Bernie was right. The COVID-19 pandemic proved that Bernie was right, that the government absolutely has a role to play, that it should be helping in the ways of healthcare, of education, of, of keeping us safe in more than just, having the biggest military, the most lethal force on earth, as Vice President Harris said. And everything that we needed in that emergency is actually continuing to play out now, when it comes to the cost of education and healthcare and housing, the housing crisis being one. So I thought that was just so on the money and really trying to change the narrative around, basically move away from this Clintonism of small government, neoliberal economics, and move toward, no, government has a role to play. The FDR, whatever, the ghosts of FDR past of the Democratic Party. But I quickly want to say that, Corinda, you and I were exchanging some angry DMs because of Representative Cori Bush being ousted by, millions of dollars in Israeli lobby money. And that right there, what he said at the end was he didn't name them, but he was talking about Representative Bush and Bowman and how they were able to be primaried because the millions of dollars. And he, again, put both parties on blast, and he does that so well.
I mean, I think it was kind of really telling how, the Democrats didn't really say anything about, Bowman and Cori Bush being primaried with AIPAC and similar PACs money,
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so
we're just going to let a few of us
we're just going to let that
picked
ride.
It's very
it's
like,
fine.
Yeah, I don't know if it's not really this, but it's a little bit like Game of Thrones. Like we won't talk about the White Walkers who are like picking us off one by one. We're just gonna keep focusing on our terrestrial shit and not talk about the zombies. Anyway,
Yeah,
Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway from I was on the floor for Bernie's speech, and I mean, he got basically the kind of reception that ex-president. I mean, it seems almost underhanded to say he got the same reception that Bill Clinton got, but at the DNC, that makes a huge difference. And I think if you
Yeah,
think about, I was in Philadelphia in 2016, and there was real resentment towards Sanders there. It was a kind of at times a um, it was at times that it felt like an embattled convention for the first 2 days
yeah,
8 years ago.
I was there.
Yeah,
It was it was also exciting. It was
yeah,
very like I felt like it was very democratic. Like people going chanting Bernie, Hillary
yeah,
at each other was actually kind of tight. But
yeah,
anyways,
yeah. It was great. I think in a lot of ways, what you saw here, and I think Sanders' speech was the best, and AOC's honestly, but was the thing that stood out to me was that Sanders didn't sound that different from a lot of the other speeches. There were people chanting for unions like the entire time
yeah,
that I was walking the floor, and I think I talked to Sean Fain and other people, and that was also inconceivable 8 years ago. And the extent to which so many of Sanders's kind of more, maybe not his biggest ideas, but so many of his smaller ideas have become just normal within the Democratic Party. The idea that the state exists to help other people, right? That is now just party dogma. Like it's
yeah,
accepted by everybody. And that I think is really interesting because his speech didn't sound radical at all. It would have sounded radical. It did sound radical when he spoke 8 years ago. And I
right.
think that, but the question that I have, and I'll have a piece in the new issue about this, is that represents a transition, right? And I think right now we are in this transitionary moment. So Sanders' speech, part of the reason he got that reception was that it was treated as a kind of valediction, right? That it was the same way that Joe Biden was treated. It was the same way that Bill Clinton was treated. There was a palpable sense on the floor that, we might not see these guys again.
Right.
4 years from now, they might be gone. And so you're like, okay, Clintonism
wow.
is gone, right? But Sanders is also moving, right? AOC's speech was her moving towards the center, not the other way around. So I think you've seen the party's centrist and moderate wing, aggressively adopt a lot of left-wing ideas. You're seeing the most representative young progressives who have survived things like the APAC push move towards the center. The question that I had coming out of this convention is, okay, well, where are we headed, right? And
Yeah.
Harris lost in 2020 or 2019. She didn't even make it to 2020 because she couldn't answer that question. People wanted that question to be answered. And this convention didn't do it for me. I think you got a good sense of where the party was. And I think Biden, for all of his many faults as a president, has always been very good at moving towards wherever he sees the center of the party at. And Harris, I think, has followed him in that way. But there wasn't anyone who could articulate, okay, this is what the Democratic Party is right now. This is where we're
No.
going. This is where we're
Yeah.
going to be 4 years from now. And that I think stood out to me about Sanders' speech too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I say it was sort of all over the place. It kind of like a seeing eye, a magic eye poster, like, whatever you see, I don't know, like, you're going to find what you want there. And I think there's an interesting, I talked about this on the last episode, but, the question of moving to the center or like, is AOC moving to the center? Is Bernie moving to the center? Or is the Democratic Party moving to the left? And the answer can be both.
Yeah, I think it is both.
Yeah, and the answer could be, I mean, and I think that, I think this political cartoon was sort of making the rounds. I wanted to put it up. It was like, it's basically, if you're listening, AOC and Bernie dragging a communist crying into 21st century relevance, right? Which I have a lot of problems with this cartoon. I think this is so fucking dumb. If anything, it's the other way around. But I do think that the reason this cartoon was kind of obnoxious and annoying is because it perfectly encapsulate what leftist co-optation looks like, what it means to be co-opted by the center, is throwing away the very people who gave you this push, who created the Bernie movement, who have been on the front lines, whether it was in Standing Rock during the BLM demonstrations, right? Now what's going on in the genocide in Gaza, the same people who in fucking 5 years liberals will lie about always being on the side of those the people that you're saying you're throwing under the bus, fuck you, we're dragging your ass, you're not dragging us. So that's, anyway, tell me how you really feel. But I do think that I think AOC maybe more so than Bernie is moving towards the center. I didn't really like her speech, especially obviously the part about Kamala Harris working night and day to get a ceasefire. We know that's not true.
It's definitely not true.
Not true. And I will say, and Corinda, you know this, because I just say I don't like California Democrats. Like, California Democrats are some of the most billionaire beholden, like self-satisfied, never had to worry about a fucking, election motherfuckers. And when I see like Pelosi and Newsom all clapping for Kamala, I'm like, oh shit, here we go. These like NIMBY, YIMBY ass, like whoever, these real estate neoliberals think it's going to be their time to shine. And I'm like, to me, I think, and to Alex's point, like, this is the moment where actually progressives need to push the hardest. And they did.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the Democrats have always been resistant to their progressive wing, right? Whereas seems like the Republicans, like all the people who are on the fringe, they're like, come on in. Like, we want you here. Like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like nobody's trying to push her out. Nobody's trying to make it seem like she's not part of them. I think the more progressive wings of Democrats, they've always kind of been like, Ileana, they've always kind of been like, hey, like you're going too far out there. Like we don't want all that. And I feel like, this is a time where, they have to continue to do that, because the Democrats are never going to be like, hey, more progressive, come on.
Right. Like, it's like we need to cater to our base. Now.
Like we never, like they want our vote, but once we get the vote, it's like they don't do the things necessary that we ask them to do to get our vote. They all of a sudden get amnesia. Like what? Like Black Lives Matter, huh? Like what? Like
we knelt in a Kente
all these
club.
Progressive causes, like you voted for us, and they're like, what did you say? Like I couldn't hear you. Like the phone's going dead. Like bad connection.
Yeah. No, yeah, you don't have. They change their phone numbers. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.